It's 10 a.m. We're live now. Councillors should be able to unmute.
Okay, thank you. Open the meeting with the, this is a continuation of a previous meeting. The territory acknowledgement in the spirit of peace and friendship, we honor the Nishmek of the Three Fires Confederacy on whose traditional territory we are gathered. The city of Sarnia has resolved to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. I will ask, are there any conflicts of interest? I am not seeing any. Okay, thank you. This is a continuation of a previous meeting, and we'll continue to move it forward as we did before. Just a couple of comments. That it was the city, I think, just from what I've heard in the feedback, I think it's forgotten the city started this plan. Normally developers pay their way to get the urban boundaries changed, but council decided, and I think rightly so, that we would put this as part of the official plan. So that started in 2019. So this is a city-led initiative looking at a growth. To the speakers, I will call your name and your organization. I would ask you, I know you've been advised, so you can stay within the 10 minutes. It's good for you and it's good for the audience too. And I would ask Councillor Vandenberg, you've got a couple of motions here. When we get to that point, if you could retable them to the May 9th meeting, which will be council's meeting without public input, because we're still receiving submissions. And I was just inquiring, there's one coming from the research park, which I think you really need to see before you make any final decisions. And okay, thanks very much. Do you want to do that right now?
Yeah, we can do that, right? We could just table that to May 9th then, Your Worship.
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor White, all in favor? That's done, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Bird, you're voting against it?
Fine.
Okay, so this will help because that's the way if any of the speakers around here, they'll realize it's not going to be dealt with today. Finally, we should also point out, and I am going to go to Ms. Forfar for a very brief presentation, is that everything we're subject to here, and everything we decide as a council will be subject to review by the county and probably more importantly, the province of Ontario to see if it fits their planning. So with that, I'm going to ask Ms. Forfar if she wants to give us a very quick overview, similar to what she did for the first meeting. And then I'll go to Gary Martin and Crispin Colvin from the Federation of Agriculture. Ms. Forfar?
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council, and welcome everyone watching today. We certainly appreciate your time as this is an important milestone that continues today. I am here today as part of an integrated team that's been working through the process to create a new and modernized official plan for the city of Sarnia over about the past 18 months. We're delighted to be here today to continue this public meeting, as Mayor Bradley alluded to, for this draft official plan before the community for consideration. As a quick note, before we get started, all comments and submissions received to date and in the future will be logged and responded to through a comment matrix that will be released at a future council meeting. The matrix will provide feedback and answers to all public comments received and will note where changes to the plan were made or why changes were perhaps not made. All of this will be available for council and the community to consider as part of the recommendation to adopt the final version of the new Sarnia official plan. But today is for public input, so please note that no decisions will be made. Our lead planning consultant, Mr. Ron Palmer, is with us today, as well as to support answering questions or providing clarification. With that, Your Worship, I'll turn it back to move forward with the public meeting.
Okay. And Ms. Forfar, I did express to the CEO that I hope when we get to the May 9th meeting, if that's the one that we make these decisions, council will have like a checklist, because these issues are complex and they're integrated. So council can go through the list and make decisions, on this issue, on this issue, on this issue. So we're not, muddling around trying to cover off everything. So hopefully that could be part of that matrix you talked about. Are there any questions from council at this stage to staff? Councillor Bird?
Thank you, Mayor Bradley. Through the chair to staff, have any changes been made to this document since the last time we saw it?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Bird, no, at this point it remains the original. Again, staff and our consulting team are logging all of the input, and then there'll be a sort of revised version provided to council and the community with that matrix attached for them to consider.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other further questions? I'm not seeing any. Okay, well, let's go to our first delegation, which is the Lambton Federation of Agriculture and the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. Mr. Martin, Mr. Colvin.
Okay, Mr. Martin's just joining now.
Thank you.
think I'm on here. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can, Mr. Martin.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Welcome today. Welcome. And is Crispin on? Should double check that. Okay, great.
Yeah, he's on now, Mr. Martin.
Okay, perfect. Welcome. Thank you to Mayor Bradley, council, staff, and viewing public for allowing us to present today. Through the mayor, I'd like to introduce myself and my colleague. My name is Gary Martin, and I'm currently president of the Lambton Federation of Agriculture. Formed in 1941 on a local level to represent the voice of the farmer in Lambton County on issues relating to their farm operations, while bridging with the community and other sectors and partners and service providers. We're on the grow, now supporting 1,942 farm families, and in 2021, we supported 1,927. Our mantra is to advance agriculture and the rural community through partnerships, education, and advocacy. My colleague who has joined me today is Crispin Colvin, and he's currently the Executive Director for the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, and he's also our Regional Zone Director for Lambton and Middlesex counties. He will be continuing on with the rest of our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Mayor Bradley and Council for having us here today. I wonder, is the presentation? Wonderful. There we go. Thank you very much. As Gary pointed out, we represent a large area. We represent the entire province, and in that province of Ontario, there are 38,000 farm families that we represent. And we like to consult and be consulted on legislation that impacts the sustainability of our farms and our food businesses. Next slide, please. Ontario farmlands are a finite resource, and they're also a shrinking resource, especially the class 1, 2, and 3 lands that make up our best agricultural producing land. And we can't continue to sustain that loss. In fact, less than 5% of Ontario and only 7% of Canada can support agriculture. So what's 175 acres a day? Well, I'll put it in perspective for you. 175 acres would provide 1.3 million servings of nachos, as well as 273,000 chicken wings and 1.3 million quarter-pound cheeseburgers. Or, if you want to look at it another way, it would produce 532,400 turkeys, which would feed 133,000 families of 4. That's what 175 acres a day is. Most of the land that we lose is around our urban centers, and we're losing that most productive land. Next slide, please. So despite occupying less than 5% of our overall agricultural land, our overall area, agriculture and the agri-food processing in Ontario are one of the number one, in fact, the number one economic driver, with over $47 billion in GDP and supporting in excess of 860,000 jobs. Lambton County itself contributes over $302,000 to the GDP of Lambton County, with corn, hogs, and soybeans being the top farm cash receipts. We continued to produce food during the pandemic, and we continued to produce that economic stimulus while other areas of the economy were suffering. Next slide. The local planning process that you were talking about earlier, Mayor, provides a framework for a balanced consideration of land use needs for both agriculture and development. Minister's zoning orders, however, short-circuit that long-established planning principle. Now, we recognize the need in rural Ontario that we need employees and they need affordable places to live. And one of the things that Sarnia has done well in the past, and I hope will continue to do, is intensification. But what I found interesting in the previous meeting that I attended was the number of developers and people who came with proposals for land uses had received comments and actually solicited comments from groups such as MTO, Enbridge, and Canada Post. Not one had considered or consulted agriculture. Next slide, please. We believe at OFA that the best and highest use of Ontario's land, arable land in particular, is agriculture. Land capable of supporting agricultural activities is a finite, strategic, and a non-renewable resource, and it's worth preserving for its ability to provide that safe, affordable, and sustainable food, fiber, and fuel for Ontario, and indeed Canada and the world. In fact, only 14% of the countries in the world are self-sufficient and have excess crop production. According to a study done in 2014, it listed only 8 major countries in the world that were self-sufficient. Canada was one of those countries that is self-sufficient. That underlines the need for food security. Communities that have the ability to grow and export food, they'll be the communities with the strongest economic base. Food and food production will be the economic strength of the future. In fact, the lands by Brights Grove that were brought up at the last meeting that you're considering for development are highly productive lands. That land is suitable for vegetable production and would certainly be a successful market gardening area, and it would provide locally Lambton products. Next slide, please. We understand at the OFA that the need for government to respond to the various economic challenges brought to light by the pandemic, but that there are some concerns with the Planning Act. And we want to make sure that the Planning Act follows the provincial policy statement. This is our overarching philosophy. And when Planning Act decisions are being made, we would ask that an agricultural impact assessment be part of that development process. What is the impact in the surrounding areas? What is the impact to the agricultural growth of Ontario and Sarnia and Lambton? We recommend strengthening the Planning Act and the PPS and have fixed urban settlement boundaries and maintain the policies that require mandatory intensification. In fact, the downtown areas are most successful and vibrant because of people who live there, shop there, and support the local businesses. All of that is lost when you expand out into suburbs. Hamilton has recently said that it is not going to expand its urban boundaries. It's going to intensify. Halton has talked of the same, not expanding its boundary, and in fact specifically mentioned the need to maintain land for food production. Next slide, please. Once a farm is turned into a shopping center or a warehouse or a subdivision, it's never going to produce food again. We lose that ability to produce the food, the fiber, and the fuel that was grown on that land, and we lose it permanently. But aside from food production, farmland provides an expansive list of environmental benefits to all of Ontario as well. Next slide, please. Once lands are taken out of production, the ecological benefits like wildlife habitat, wildlife corridors, carbon sequestration, climate change mitigation, and groundwater recharge are no longer possible on that land. With worldwide concerns on climate change, farmland's ability to sequester carbon while still producing food should be considered a priority. This is one more reason to protect rather than pave. Next slide, please. The COVID-19 pandemic amplified the demand for local food production. Consumers were increasingly looking for locally grown produce, locally grown meats and dairy products, and it continues to this day. Products that meet the high standards that make Ontario and Canada products in demand worldwide. In fact, 70% of what we consume in Canada, we grow in Canada. And 50% of what we grow, we are able to export. This is according to a study done in June of 2021. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to close with one last remark. Ukraine exported 43 million tons of grain in 2021. In fact, their production increased by 32% to a total of 85 million tons. But because of what's happening in Ukraine, it's expected that this will be reduced or even lost for the foreseeable future. The consequences are that Asia, Africa, and possibly even Europe will have shortfalls of food. We can make up a lot of that difference if we preserve our agricultural lands and become leaders in food production. Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you and Council for giving Gary and I the opportunity to speak with you today, and I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, sir.
Are there any questions, Councillor Bird?
Thank you, Mayor Bradley. Through the chair to Crispin, thank you very much for the presentation. You mentioned about the Brights Grove lands being really good farmland, rich land, and would be perfect for farmland. Well, just following on from that, with regard to the land on that southwest corner of Waterworks and Lakeshore, I understand that the provincial minimum distance and separation, the MDS regulations, would prohibit the long-time landowners from having livestock or their supporting barns on their Brights Grove property or growing any specialty crops. I have also learned that even though their lands are in dire need of organic fertilizer, such as manure, their proximity to urban Sarnia prevents them from doing so without repercussions. So my question to you is this: are these prohibitions and restrictions typically the case with most viable family farms?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bird. I'm not sure that those prohibitions are necessarily viable. The land is useful for many productions, many things that it can grow. Certainly MDS creates a problem. The minute a house is severed from a 100-acre farm, for example, as a surplus dwelling, that can impact what can go on that existing remaining farmland. In terms of things like manure, there is farm legislation that allows normal farm practices. So while some people may be concerned with the odor that they may have for a little while, it dissipates pretty quickly. Modern technology allows manure to be put into the ground with minimum to no odor issues. But that's part of the cost of growing food. And one of the things that particularly will hit hard this year is the challenge of getting fertilizer due to the tariffs because of the Ukrainian situation. With the lack of fertilizer means that more farmers will be using manure and more farmers are looking for manure. In fact, it's become a product that you can actually sell now, whereas before there were in some cases you had to give it away. It's that valuable in terms of a nutrient for the soil and to regenerate the soil. So normal farm practices create certain issues within urban proximity, but urbanites like to eat like the rest of us, and it's a small price to pay for the cost of having food on your table.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
And we could go to the next speaker, Mr. Rob Longo with the Sarnia Lambton Real Estate Board. We've also had, so Council is aware, several speakers drop out. Mr. DeSena had a family emergency, and I'm sure he'll be communicating to us in writing. And also Mr. Matt Campbell, number 12, has withdrawn from speaking. So with that, I'll go to you, Mr. Longo.
Mr. Longo, you just need to enable your microphone and camera.
There we go. Good morning, and thank you, Your Worship, members of Council. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here in front of everyone here today. My name is Rob Longo. For those that don't know, I am a lifelong resident of Sarnia, and I'm also president of the Sarnia Lambton Real Estate Board. I'm here today on behalf of a representative of over 320 local realtors that are currently representing well over 3,000 active buyers that are looking every day to find a home in Sarnia Lambton. Together, we collectively represent over $1 billion worth of yearly transactional volume, which creates an estimated $142 million in spin-off spending for our community and another estimated 900 spin-off jobs. My goal here today is to try to arm you with some facts and information before you make your decision in this process next month. We've been taking this process extremely seriously because despite what we feel the consultants and the city are downplaying, the fact here is that once this urban growth boundary is set in the official plan, it cannot be changed. The consultants will say that this plan can be amended in the future. This is not totally accurate, as the only way to really change this plan in the future is to redo all of these studies again from scratch. And the city, as you all know, has already invested well over $500,000 in studies and fees into putting this plan together. And I think we can all understand where the consultants are getting their motivation in saying, maybe we should redo all of these studies and fees in the next 5 years. Many of you by now have heard our stance on this official plan, that it does not adequately address the housing supply needs for our community. And today I'll present you with all of the facts to allow you to draw your own conclusions. As you all know, we are in the midst of an unprecedented housing crisis. We have seen a record increase in demand with little to no increase in housing supply. Remote work has been a huge win for Sarnia Lambton, because when you give people the opportunity and the freedom to choose where they want to live and they aren't tied to their job's location. They are choosing communities like ours. This monumental shift has not been factored into these plans. We all hear the continued calls for affordable housing. The first step in the creation of affordable housing long-term is to increase the overall housing supply. If we had a greater supply, it would help to ease the pressure that we've seen on home prices. But if we continue to restrict the supply by not providing enough development land, then we will continue to see prices climb even beyond what they have now. The planning department and the consultants have touted the population growth projections in this report as a big win for Sarnia-Lambton, and they say we should be satisfied with these increased numbers. But the fact is that a lot of the consultants did not do any actual consulting with stakeholders and the members of the community. Not once have I seen mentioned what Sarnia's population growth has been in the last 5 years. Everyone's focused on the last 30 years, saying we've had no population growth for 30 years, which is in fact false. From 2016 to 2021, in the last 5 years, Sarnia's population grew by over 2,800 people. That's about 560 new people every year. These are the numbers of actual growth, not projections. These were the numbers that came in and were in place before the consultants and before the studies. And I found these numbers for free as provided by Stats Canada. Now, this new growth is a result of a lot of hard work by different municipal agencies to attract new residents to this area. The Sarnia-Lambton Economic Partnership, which obviously the city helps to fund, has an entire team centered around new resident attraction. The local immigration task force, which both the mayor and Stacey Forfar sit on, is hoping to attract at least 500 newcomers to Sarnia-Lambton each year. By accepting this official plan the way it is proposed, what we're doing is putting an artificial lid on Sarnia's growth, and we're tying the hands of these and so many other great organizations. So if in the last 5 years we've grown by about 560 people per year, and these new consultant projections are saying we're going to grow about 500 people per year, that means that in fact the consultant's projection is not really an increasing growth trend, but in fact a decreasing growth trend. To which we have to question, why are these consultants projecting Sarnia's population to slow down in its growth? Because I can tell you firsthand in our business that every day we're turning potential customers and new residents to our area away. Potential new residents come to Sarnia in search of a better lifestyle and a welcoming community. And when they arrive, they find there are no suitable housing options available to them. Contrary to what the planners say and believe, these potential new residents don't simply accept this fact and wait for something else to come up or resign themselves to going to live in an area that they do not want or in a style of home that they do not want. They just pick up and continue on. They go down the road to Chatham-Kent or Goderich or Collingwood, Port Stanley, whatever other community will give them the proper accommodations. A lot of these reports will also continue to cite the County of Lambton's official plan, because the County of Lambton's official plan a number of years ago set Sarnia's population growth to be 0. However, it's very important to note that in that official plan, they mention very specifically that the way people are using their homes is changing. People are staying in their homes longer, people are living longer overall, and there are less residents per house these days. So even if we have 0 population growth, the county's official plan suggests that Sarnia should be building 230 new housing units every year in order to keep pace with the changing demand. The new proposal in front of you reverses those county population numbers and projects over 12,000 new residents moving into Sarnia. Again, that's about 500 people per year. So how many new units do these studies project we will need to house 500 people per year? They say 186. 186 new units per year for 500 people. And keep in mind what we just said, with the county's official plan said 0 new people would still require 230 new units. It's very clear when you start to break down these plans that these numbers simply do not add up. We cannot physically fit this new growth and these new people into our existing housing supply, which is already taxed and overburdened. We need more land for growth, and we need to significantly increase the urban boundary in order to achieve that. We all know that our city can only grow east. The development of Brights Grove is not a matter of if, but when. So why not now? Why not move the urban boundary and so that we can begin that planning process so that sometime in the next 5, 10, or 15 years, we can see the orderly and the properly designed and controlled development in Brights Grove. Let's all work together now to plan a sustainable and desirable community. The demand is here now. The demand to build and grow is here now. Let's not put a cap on Sarnia's growth. Let's focus on that positive momentum and make sure we're poised and ready to ride the wave of growth. Because at the end of the day, if Sarnia doesn't take that population growth, someone else will. Those people that love our area and everything we have to offer will go to Plimpton, St. Clair, Lambton Shores, Enniskillen, wherever else they can fit in. And those municipalities will get all the benefit of the growth, the economic spin-off, the tax dollars, and all the spending. And then those residents will still come into Sarnia to use our hospital, to use our parks, to use our arenas and public areas, to enjoy the new $50 million proposed waterfront development, the new recreation center, all of these things at the Sarnia taxpayers' expense. So what can council do? I strongly urge our council to make 2 critical adjustments to this official plan in order to ease the restrictions on the housing supply and to keep Sarnia growing. First thing we can do is we can set our own growth projections, which will then allow the expansion of the urban growth boundary. Everyone keeps bringing up that this proposal or this official plan will have to be approved by the province, which is true. The province is going to ask Sarnia, how many people are you going to grow by? Therefore, how much housing supply do you need? Council should choose to set a population growth target of 1.5% per year, and therefore give city staff a directive to include Brights Grove within the urban growth boundary. And secondly, I know a lot of you have heard the debates from us and other people as well over the short-term rental legislation. This ties in directly to that as part of Sarnia. Obviously, we have a huge industrial population, a lot of people coming in as transient workers and people staying for sort of short to medium term stays. I would strongly urge the council to direct staff to drop the primary residence requirements and the 180-day rental limits from the short-term rental proposals as well. So with that, I thank you. If there are any questions or discussion, obviously, I would be more than happy.
Got Councillor Stark. Thanks, Mr. Longo. I've got Councillor Stark and then Councillor Berg.
Thanks for your presentation, Mr. Longo. I won't say you, but your organization organized a major email campaign around this issue. Have you similarly organized the same email campaign from all of your members to the provincial level and also to the county level?
So through your worship to Councillor Stark, this decision is going to be made by Sarnia City Council. Like I said, the province will oversee the process. The province is here to double check everything that you guys decide, okay? What they want to see is a correlation between the growth rate and the land availability. So that's why the key here is if council sets a growth target rate, then that's what's going to calculate out in the formula the amount of land that's needed. In terms of the county, the same thing. As long as we can show there's reasoning behind these decisions, then I believe very strongly we will have the support of the province and the county. Again, they're not up for discussion right now. They're not the ones that are making this decision. At the end of the day, it's coming down to council. So that's why we've been lobbying our local council. And yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, Councillor Berg.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Stark.
It actually doesn't. The question was, have you organized a email campaign or a lobbying campaign to those bodies? And based upon your answer, I have to assume the answer is no. The next question then would be, will you? Because ultimately they are making the decision, not us.
So again, through your worship, they are going to approve or oversee the decision that this local council is making. Through our governing body, we work directly every day with the province of Ontario. Obviously, we've seen in the last couple of months a lot of the lobbying efforts through OREA, which is the Ontario Real Estate Association, have come to fruition through the provincial bodies. We've all seen the news with the different task forces and things that are coming out of the province. So they're working very hard at, doing progressive ideas like this and reducing red tape. The county is not having a decision-making process on this right now. It is the decision of the local council. So if the local council works to push this forward, then obviously we will deal with the county or the province or whoever we need to discuss with after that. But it's got to come, the first initial decision has to come from our local council.
Councillor Bird and then Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Mayor Bradley. Through the chair to Mr. Longo, thank you very much for your presentation. I can completely agree with all your comments, so great information. The question I have for you today is, you mentioned 500 plus extra people have moved into the area over the last 5 years on a yearly basis. Have you by any chance kept sort of a record, just roughly, the people moving here each year, their age group that they fall in? Because I'm trying to correlate all this with, do people move here for a job, a transfer, or are they moving here because they've retired and they just like the area?
Absolutely. Again, through your worship to Councillor Bird, we keep somewhat informal records as best we can through the real estate board ourselves. Obviously, Statistics Canada will have a lot, more accurate numbers in that. From our numbers that we've seen, we have seen a good sort of balance of diversity. Obviously, we have been becoming a predominant retirement community. A lot of people are choosing to retire in Sarnia and Sarnia-Lambton, which I think is a good thing. But the nice thing over the last number of years is we have seen a good mixture and good diversity in terms of age ranges. The big thing, like I touched on, is the remote work and work from home, right? Because we haven't necessarily had to have that correlation between people, younger families and people having jobs here. Now we're seeing a lot of families and young couples choose to relocate here that have school-age children. And that's been a nice thing to see. The other thing I think we're seeing a lot of that hasn't been mentioned is retention of young people and retention of talent. Mm-hmm. Whereas for the past 20, 30 years, a lot of young people, when they get through, high school, grade school, high school, they go off to university, and then they're forced to go to larger centers in Toronto or the GTA in order to find work in their field, and they leave Sarnia-Lambton. Now we've seen a lot of those people choosing to stay because they're given the option, okay, I've got my job in the GTA or wherever it may be, but I'm allowed to stay here and work remotely. So we are seeing a good mixture of not just retirees, but younger people choosing to stay and younger families with school-age children that are choosing to relocate here permanently.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councillor Dennis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor
Bradley.
Thank you very much, Mayor Bradley. Rob, thank you for your presentation. Rob, when I first came into the real estate business myself back in the early 90s, my bread and butter and a lot of the agents' bread and butter were first-time buyers. Probably if 10 homes were sold, probably 6 or 7 were sold to first-time buyers. That's drastically changed now. A lot of young people are very worried that they're not going to experience the dream of Canadian home ownership, which is awful. Nowadays, can you maybe explain to people how hard it is, how difficult it is for young people first starting out, saving down payments, qualifying? They've tightened the screws with respect to qualifying. How difficult it is for first-time buyers to qualify and buy a first-time home?
Sure. Again, it's getting difficult for sure for everyone involved, not just first-time buyers, but everyone through the whole spectrum of the buying process, as prices have risen so drastically in the last few years. As with anything that we encounter in the world, it's a very simple economic formula. It's supply and demand. If we do not have enough supply, the prices continue to rise. If there was more housing units available, then we would see more inventory in the market, and the housing prices would be forced to adjust, right? So it has been especially hard on first-time buyers or people in the lower price brackets, obviously, as that number has moved up a lot more drastically than the really high price properties as a percentage basis over the last few years. That has gotten more difficult, but we are hoping with, some hard work here from council in terms of new approvals and things like that, with the lessening of red tape at the provincial level, that we're able to see more housing units created over the next few years in Ontario. Part of Doug Ford's task force, they were proposing 15 million new housing units across Ontario. So we're hoping with some of these efforts that we're able to see more supply in the marketplace, which will obviously help the affordability factors in the long run.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Bushi and then Councillor Burrell.
Mr. Longo, at length, have you sat down with the administration and the consultant and spoke to them about your ideas and just quote to me what they said to you?
Yeah, so through your worship to Councillor Bushi, we did have discussion with the planning department and with the consultant. Obviously that wasn't as receptive as I would have liked things to be. But I think part of the issue, and that's why I discussed really, I don't blame necessarily the consultants. They're taking input from the equations that they have, and they're trying to factor things out and decide how much we're gonna grow or how much land we need. That's why the issue we're really taking is with the original population study, which was done previously to this study. That's why we say if we set the population growth target, that's the input number that gets to calculate the number of homes needed. If we say we're going to grow by 1.5% population, therefore we need this many homes, right? So the problem, in my opinion, was that the population growth target got set very, very low on the initial study. Therefore, the number of housing units needed was very low. And then again, a lot of these factors weren't taken into context, such as the work from home, the way people are changing to use their homes. I think the County of Lambton official plan comparison does this perfectly when they said Sarnia is going to have zero growth, but will still require 230 new housing units every year. Now we're saying we're going to grow by 500 people and we're going to require 186 units. The math just doesn't add up on those factors, right? So overall, I guess the staff and the consultants heard these same sort of arguments from me, but ultimately, obviously, as we've seen, there has been no change in their stance.
Councillor Burrell.
I believe Councillor Bushy had a follow-up question.
Did you, Councillor Bushi?
I just want to ask him, I know there are vacancies in the city. You walk around and you see vacancies. Have your board really made an effort together to go after those vacancies rather than the new developments?
So through your worship, in terms of vacancies, we're speaking about residential vacant homes or vacant apartments. Yeah, at the end of the day, you can't control what someone does with their property or what their land, right? But as far as our information, our records are concerned, the residential vacancy rate in Sarnia is less than 1.5%. Like, things are very full, whether it's apartment buildings, houses, properties, things like that. From all the statistics that we've seen, the vacancy rate here is very, very low. Obviously, there will be select places where there is vacancy for whatever reason. We can't control that on an individual basis, but we know that overall we can see the demand is so much greater than what's available.
Thank you. Councillor Burrell now.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, my question really is, it appears to me that the real estate grouping, certainly for the emails and that I've received, are really, really hot on the Brights Grove area. Fair enough. But I haven't heard any comment about the discussion that's been going on with regards to the employment lands, converting those lands into housing. Do you have any thing you can add to us with regards to that?
Sure, Councilor Burrell, that's actually a very good question. So as I mentioned in my discussion there, I don't want to specifically promote one area or the other. What we're here to promote is we need more housing supply. We need to increase the number of houses that are being built in Sarnia, whether it's houses, apartments, condos, townhouses, the whole spread. The logical motion of that is Sarnia can only grow east. So whether that's continuations of, beyond Blackwell Side Road in Development Area 2, or whether that's Brights Grove. We're not here to make very specific arguments here for or against either of those. I think the Brights Grove one is the most logical next step beyond Area 2. But the goal is more housing supply, and we're not necessarily specific to a specific area, right?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Councilor
but
Brewer.
that doesn't really answer. In terms of the Brights Grove, then you have to expand the municipal built-up boundary. But when they talk about the employment lands, then that's really putting, basically changing areas that might otherwise be commercial or industrial into housing. And as I say, I haven't heard any comments from the realtor group with regards to that. I mean, they keep on pushing the boundary, but if you listen to what the agricultural sector says, that doesn't sound like a particularly good idea. But to me, the redevelopment of underused or employment lands makes sense. But as I say, I've heard nothing from the realtor industry on that prospect.
Right. So we fully support the research park. I think that's a very positive and underutilized asset that we have in Sarnia Lambton. We would love to see the research park continue on the way it is with proposed continued development in terms of job creation rather than converting that to residential land. I think it's important to note that the official plan document, the proposed official plan document that you've been provided with is the third draft now, as the first draft with the population projections suggested that Area 2 would not be enough land and that we needed more residential housing land. The second draft then came back saying that all of the development land within the research park should be converted to residential. And now the third draft is saying leave the north side of Wellington and just convert the south side. So we've seen three different iterations here. And what basically has happened is they've taken these population numbers and shrank them down to the point where they fit within Area 2. We've reduced the population growth a little bit to play with the numbers. We've intensified the density in Area 2, and we've tried to force that population growth really in Area 2. And I think that the research park is a very valuable asset here. I think it's been underutilized and underdeveloped and underpromoted in terms of a job creation asset. We've seen such great things that they are able to do there in terms of the research and technologies, especially now with Lambton College and the advancements there. So I think that's an important thing to protect. We would fully support the protection of all of the research park lands as employment lands rather than residential conversion. I think there's more than enough land that we could do some residential expansion elsewhere while still protecting those lands. And theoretically, if we're adding 12,000 more people, then we're going to need more commercial and employment lands available anyway.
Thank you very much, Mr. Longo, and thank you for answering the questions there. The next speaker I have is Mr. Josh Duarte. Mr. Duarte on the call and speaking to the official plan.
Yes, he's just joining now. Mr. Duarte, you just need to turn on your video and microphone.
Please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear
Yes,
me?
please. Yes, we can. Please go ahead. We can't see you.
I'm just clicking to start my video thing. Whoa. Okay, so I do have a plan. It's a nice plan. I wrote it down. It sounds good, and it's got a lot of questions on it for you guys. So a little bit of stop and start. I hope I can get it through. I did actually write it to say I would ask you a question and answer, but as I've seen, you've done a presentation and then done the questions afterwards. So I think that's more appropriate. Okay, so it's called the 25-year land plan by City of Sarnia Council, and it's going to sound more like a little bit of a restaurant review more than a service review on the actual plan. So if I'm a new customer and I come in and I buy your service, I take your food and whatever, I eat it. And they ask me how was it? How was the food? And I would like to know, how did they who did they contact, or how do they contact people to inform the public consent? Because according to what I read on the plan, they're basically saying that whatever happens on this meeting today, they're going to basically ask for it again anyway. No matter if somebody says no, or they don't like it, or they have changes, or lots of changes possibly, they're going to say yes. So I want to know, how do they get that to that conclusion? The second one is I'm going to ask, and I actually wrote it, who, what, when, where, why. So that's, sorry, I sound like I'm repeating myself, but I'm actually doing that. Or my second question is, who is going to see these results? And today, I am 30 years old. And I don't know if I'm going to make it to 55. It's not that old, but I don't know if I'm going to make it. And I want to say the number of days, 9,125 days is the amount of 25 years. I'm not sure if I am going to live that long. But you guys are saying, well, 30 isn't that old, and neither is 55. And I would say, well, start at this. If you're 55 today, and it's 25 years from now, when the plan is supposed to be completed, you would be 80 years old. And 80 is quite old. But, you know, it's not maybe as old as you could be. I mean, the Queen has been older, and, you know, it's not impossible to live that long. But I imagine if you were 55 today, I know people that obviously aren't in my life anymore, and I would say if you're ended at 75, you would not see this plan, because that would be the amount of time. If they were saying you have to wait until you're 80 to see this plan, you wouldn't make it if you're 55 today. So if you're 80, so we go from 55 to 80, and you're 80 today, you would go to 95 years old, which would be older than the Queen herself. That's a quite old age. And I want to know, are they going to be able to enjoy something like public parks or bicycle riding or at 95 years old? And to me, I don't think so. And for myself, I live with my grandparents, and my grandfather has reached the age of 92. It was his birthday yesterday. 92. Great age. He's probably maybe the oldest man in Sarnia. And at 92, I would like to say he will not be able to enjoy this plan. As in 25 years from the end of this, he would be 115 years old, which people just don't live to that long. So I'd like to know, who's going to enjoy it? Is it me? Is it my parents? Is it a homeowner? Is it the aging population? Because as far as I can see, I am right now at 30 years old, I am at 11,000 days old. And if I have to take another 9,125 days, I have to basically relive my life again to see results. I got more, so I would like to know, who benefits the most if this plan was completed tomorrow? Is it the customer who buys the burger and feels good and feels energized, or wakes up, or is it the person who's interested? Obviously, there's somebody buying a piece of apartment or business or something. Is that the best party, or is it the community at large? You're going to build a project like that. Okay, now moving on to what. So my questions for what's are, what are the consequences of normal funding? As they said, they're going to pay a certain amount to them every year. And I would just want to know, what is the consequences of if they decide they don't want to pay extra, or they want to know, what am I getting for this extra money? For example, in a restaurant, if you're asked, what would you like? They would say, bacon and cheese, and that's an extra expense. So we want to know, are we getting more value? Are we getting a better product? Are we getting a better quality? Where is it going? My other question is, what are the benefits of this funding? So if they do decide, yes, we're going to give you this funding, we're going to do it, they want to know, what are we going to get back? Because obviously, even in an exchange such as a restaurant, food for money seems like a silly idea, but food is actually essential. And if you're in demand for that, you go there, you get what you'd like, and you pay them a payment. So we want to know, what is the exchange between the two? I would also like to know, what is the consequence of by need funding, and saying that rather than saying, I'm going to give you a gift card with unlimited amounts of money on it, and you can spend it as you'd like, why do we not say that we would take every meeting as needed? So I'm saying, if they need money, we're going to offer that to them as they need it, or whatever the demand is. Okay, and I have when. So time. So if I go in a restaurant and I get served, it takes approximately 5 minutes. Approximately, after I start and I pay it off, it takes approximately 5 minutes. And I want to say, time is not a factor you can spend on something else. If I was in demand, I'm the customer for a meal, I would not want, I'm hungry right now, I would not want somebody to say, well, could you wait 4 hours or 5 days or 2 weeks to get that food? As I'm hungry right now, if you were to tell me to come back in 2 weeks, that wouldn't satisfy my demand. So time is something we cannot spend. And if we had and I want to example this to you. If we had a barn, and I say this as a generic topic, a thing to do. I offer you a opportunity to do a job, and the thing is, I would like to get you to break a barn in the backyard. Now, it's not based on cleanliness of how you're done. It's based on time. So if I gave you as a factor that you have 3 weeks, it actually takes 3 weeks to finish this project, but I'm going to give you 1 year to do it. Would you be able to do it? And I would say yes. It'd be very easy to have lots of time. You could even take a vacation. You could wait. You could take your time. You could do it now. You could do it later. If you had only 6 months to do the same project of breaking a barn, you could still take a little time. You could, get ready. You'd have a little bit less sorting time. If you had a timeline of 1 week to break down the same barn, and it takes 3 weeks to do it, you would certainly be working harder than you normally would, especially if you know that in hindsight, it takes longer to do the actual project. And then if you if I said, you have to break down this barn, and the only factor I'm giving you is you have to do it within 5 seconds. And in 5 seconds, you've already failed. The only way...
Mr. Duarte, you're getting close to the 10-minute mark, and there are a long list of speakers. So if you'd like to come to a conclusion, that'd be great.
Well, I have more. There's a picture that I have, and then it's done. Okay, it's a little picture thing, and then it's done. So I want to know. I want to have, if I am to buy this idea from City Council, I would like to have a list, and I've noted this list as a priority. What is on the list right now? What are we going to do? A future build. What have we planned for but not actually built? A current build. What are we currently working on as a ongoing project? A stalled bill, as in something that has been said by council but not had direction or funds or whatever it is. It hasn't been realized. And I would also like to know, what have they done for the last contract or several contracts as they've done, because we would like to know if we're going to build on this project. We don't want to know what they've done. And if there was extra work, like emergency, something else that came up. So we want to know that list. And now I have where. So this is where I'm coming in. So I'm asking based on the current as they asked before. They've been talking about beach locations, and I do have a picture. Sorry, I'm just folding this up, but I don't know if you can see. Is my video is fairly blurry? I'm not sure. But okay, so as they said, City Sarnia, they're active about environmental protection, and they want to do that, and they've asked about beachfront property and if it's a public area and whether they should pay for it or not, and I would like to I don't know if you actually can see it. It's kind of a bad drawing, but in this I depicted where somebody has they live on Lakeshore and they have parked their old or broken down car on the actual pathway of the I know there is a pathway maybe on the beach, but if they park that car on their pathway, because it is their property, and as City Council said, I wonder if that has any effect. I also wonder. Now I've heard this as well.
Mr. Duarte, I'm going to point out to you again that everyone else is trying to work within the 10-minute rule, and I would ask you to do the same thing. You're way beyond your 10 minutes.
I have the time right here, and it's 8 minutes right now.
That's not what I have. But anyhow, please wrap it up.
I am. This is the last slide. This is the locations that you're talking about that you're going to fix. And I wonder, this is on the beach, 3 on the beach. I have 3. If there was, let's say, and I just want to say this, I want to know from staff or council or whoever knows, if I had my old car and I actually put it in the water because I own that beach, would that be a violation of some sort? Because you've said the beach is the private owners. And also I'd wonder if, because obviously, in my opinion, it's the city's land and not the owner's land. So I wonder if they were throwing, let's say, trash, or they had trash come into their property, would that be a problem for the beach or the community at large? Because to me, public dumping would be a problem, but you're saying that it's your private beach, you can do whatever basically you're supposed to fix it or do whatever you want with it or update it or clean it as it's supposed to be. And then the third one was that I would say, if you had a house on the beach, could I actually build a gazebo out on the water and a retaining wall where I make it where my property line, and I make a boat actually drive around where I would like to be, because you said it's my property, so maybe I could just put a retaining wall in and actually shorten the lengthway. And then the other location that I have was this is the final one. They did say they have parks as potential, and I'm wondering, are they planning on taking down trees, basically parks, trees, environmental places as a potential? And are they saying basically that they're going to offer a business or something, a place with a natural resource, a natural park, and they're going to say, would you like to build your McDonald's on? And by the time we get back to city council and we ask them, will you allow a McDonald's to be built at a public park, they'd probably say no, and basically they'd waste their time. There's another one where
Mr. Duarte, I'm going to just say to you one more time, a lot of these issues you're raising have nothing to do with the official plan, but if you have specific questions, you can just email them either to myself or the clerk.
I have emailed them.
Okay, well, that's good, and we'll have them reviewed and we'll have them responded to. But I would like to we've got a lengthy list of speakers.
Do they have questions? Is that can I answer some questions if they have any?
I'm not seeing any hands up. But thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Mr. Duarte. Andrew, I'm going to move to the next presentation if we can, which I have down as Mr. Scott Henderson from the Home Builders.
Yes, Mr. Henderson should be joining in a moment.
Hey, I've never done this before. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Henderson. I represent over 65 members of the Sarnia Lambton Home Builders Association. Our members include builders, developers, sub-trades, suppliers, and service professionals. Our members support residential construction and development in Sarnia Lambton and beyond. I'm speaking today to ask for your support to allow for future residential growth in Brights Grove. Over the past few years, we have seen an explosion of new home building activity in our neighboring communities of Plimpton, Wyoming, and St. Clair Township. We need to offer new home buyers an alternative to leaving Sarnia with their new home purchase. We keep hearing the phrase provincial policy from your planning consultant and from the City of Sarnia Planning Department. If provincial policy is so crystal clear, then why are we paying $300,000 for a study and not just having City Hall use provincial policy to create the path going forward? We have heard from past speakers, and in particular, the planning consultant hired by the Hizevkas, Victor Labrache of IBI Group, who can dispute the path created by the planning partnership. My association agrees that we need development in Area 2. However, we also need investment of arterial roads and underground municipal services and infrastructure in Area 2, and we need it much faster than that can ever get done. Brights Grove already has a main arterial road named Lakeshore Road that most planners would recognize as a huge benefit already in place. It would make good planning sense to start to develop on the opposite side of that arterial road. Not to mention that Brights Grove is already basically a standalone community that is just a part of Sarnia. We can never stop the migration of new home buyers to other nearby communities, but we could slow them down if we had something to offer in Brights Grove. No matter where people live, they are still coming to Sarnia to use everything from our arenas, pools, and splash pads. They will use Canatera Park, Centennial Park, our boat launches, and Bayshore Park. The only way to support capital expenditures such as a waterfront master plan, new splash pads, and new community centers, and any new investment of any kind in Sarnia is to add more people to the tax base. That means growth of population and jobs. The only way to add more population is to let people live where they want to live and not necessarily where consultants are telling them that they must live. I would also like to remind Council about the information that has been provided by expert consultants over the years and on other projects in Sarnia. Let's go back a few years and ask if anyone feels that the best interests of the City of Sarnia taxpayers were served regarding the cleanup of Centennial Park, or the Agora site, or the boat launch. How about the consultant that recommends selling the Sarnia Airport? If Reese's Corners can have an airport, I think Sarnia can benefit from having an airport. Recently, you awarded a tender for a new Colburn Road fire hall that saw the actual tender value soar to double the budget price, adding approximately $3 million to the end cost. I can assure you that an increase like that is not just COVID related. Finally, you can call your integrity commissioner a form of consultant, and there's probably no bigger example of a waste of taxpayers' money. So going forward, we are asking council to make the best choice for growth in the City of Sarnia and approve the changes required to the official plan to allow growth in Brights Grove. People from Sarnia need to create the future growth strategy for Sarnia, not people from Toronto. There is not a better example of good planning in the entire City of Sarnia. Thank you, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Henderson. I'm not seeing any questions, so thank you again very much. And I'd call upon Mark Hrzewka and Matt Hrzewka.
Okay, they're just joining now.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yep, please go ahead. We can see it here.
Can you pull up the presentation, please?
There you go. It's up on the screen.
Thank you so much. Honorable Mayor, Councillor, staff, and viewers, my name is Mark Azevka, and this is my brother Matt. And thank you for taking the time to hear our presentation. Today, we'd like to discuss the future of the Brights Grove sanitary system, and more specifically, how Sarnia can be more efficient and cost-effective while utilizing this important existing infrastructure. Next slide, please. So what you're looking at here is, and this is just a little bit of background, about 57 acres of lagoons. The unused portion of these lagoons comprise approximately 18 acres, or about 1/3 of the lagoon area. If Brights Grove needs to expand beyond the existing 1,200 home capacity that these lagoons currently have, then what we see is that the space is potentially available to do that. Next slide, please. Matt?
So this view is looking to the southwest. The black circle represents the new pumping station on the southeast corner of Lakeshore and Waterworks Road. The red line and arrow are where the proposed sanitary expansion is headed, all the way past Modlin Road, 5 side roads to the west. New sanitary trunk lines will have to be installed almost 3 kilometers before the first house can be accessed. And it's not clear whether connections to the sanitary system will be by choice or mandatory. Does it make financial sense to start this servicing expansion 30 meters or almost 3,000 meters away? Next slide, please. This view is looking to the east. Again, the black circle is a new pump station, and the red line represents the proposed new sanitary line heading almost all the way to Blackwell, Michigan. This proposed sanitary expansion is not meant for the above property, nor any property on the south side of Lakeshore Road in Brights Grove. It's a 26+ kilometer system that is meant to handle almost 1,100 homes that are already on a septic system. Do you notice where there may be more cost-effective solutions? Next slide, please. The area is too large to be shown with photos, so here's the plan given by the City of Sarnia in their open session report in 2019. Again, the black circle on the slide is the existing sanitary pumping station in Brights Grove beside the sewage lagoon circled in red. The lagoons are currently sized for about 1,200 additional homes. Next slide, please.
So marching through it here, the red area on this map is the proposed sanitary expansion area to be serviced by the sewage lagoons. The box on the upper left side of this slide is the list of the 40+ streets for this proposed expansion. This area comprises of approximately 1,080 existing homes and 26+ kilometers of paved roads. What's the potential cost of this expansion? When is this proposed expansion expected to start and finish? And how will the city recover costs if this is a voluntary connection? And probably most importantly, do those property owners in the red area agree to pay up to $50,000 per home for a sanitary connection along with the monthly fees forever? Let me repeat. Do those property owners in the red area agree to pay up to $50,000 per home for a sanitary connection along with the monthly fees forever? Next slide, please. The green rectangle is our property, which resides immediately beside the pumping station and is in the center of Brights Grove. It does make sense to start development here that would help pay for the potential costly expansion further west. It does not make sense to start digging up asphalt along 40 streets and across 5 side roads and burying 26 kilometers of sanitary lines along with numerous additional pumping stations when connection is voluntary. Regardless of where sanitary expansion will occur, millions of taxpayer dollars have been spent on infrastructure that is now sitting dormant and returning nothing to the taxpayer. So now that millions have been spent on lagoon upgrades, the city has three choices, three options. Option number one, install the 26 kilometers of underground sanitary lines to homes and hope the owners will pay to connect. Or option two, start immediately beside where all existing infrastructure is located and make a return on that investment. Or option three, do nothing and lose millions in revenue. Next slide, please.
So before staff recommends spending millions of taxpayers' dollars to do this, next slide, please. It makes taxpayer sense to start here. The report entitled Asset Management Update by David Jackson, who's the General Manager of Engineering and Operations in Sarnia, in its entirety was absolutely correct. The report recommends prudent fiscal policy where you put away monies to service the future costs of the infrastructure. And as a side note, we are aware that there may be environmental and hydrological issues, and those studies are currently underway. The preliminary results are very promising, but that's not what we're talking about in this presentation. So our plan is to develop an integrated community which will provide much needed localized services to the residents in this area. Plans include a parkland apartment complex, a new community center, a community boutique retail area, all with integrated and sustainable transportation networks. Our property is uniquely located to complement residential and commercial expansion while minimizing neighborhood disturbances that are typical to infill situations. And I'm not going to bring up the 700 acres of farmland that will be converted to houses in Kamlaki. But just as a side note, our family has been members of the OFA for over 40 years. So the OFA's presentation stated that 175 acres of farmland are lost daily in Ontario to urban development. That's about 160,000 acres of farmland lost to urban development in that 5-year time frame they're talking about. So what most of the public doesn't know is that most of that farmland that's lost was not from crop farms, but from pasture farms. And most of those pasture farms were from northern and eastern Ontario, which were, for the most part, not class 1, 2, or 3 farmland. Looking at the same website, Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, southern Ontario, which includes Lambton County, has actually gained 116,000 acres of farmland over that same period of time.
Not lost.
Not lost. Lambton County actually gained over 5,600 acres of cropland in that same period, if you're referring to. And don't ask us how, but we're using the same statistics that the OFA is using. Sarnia has not expanded its urban boundary since it amalgamated with the town of Clearwater 31 years ago. We're not trying to justify the loss of farmland in Ontario. We're simply putting their presentation into perspective. So why should the city of Sarnia have more restrictive rules than places outside of Sarnia? Next slide, please.
So this slide focuses on option 3, which is the cost of doing nothing. In the April 2020 issue of the magazine First Monday, and I quote Lonnie Knapler, Lonnie Knapler said he wants to thank the city of Sarnia for the city's decision to restrict residential development within its urban boundary, as it's been a boon to his community. What is it costing Sarnia to prevent settlement area expansion where demand is high? If Sarnia does not expand the settlement area in Brights Grove, the next mayor of Plimpton, Wyoming will be a very happy person. Using the conservative assumptions shown above, the do nothing now will cost the city at least $95 million over the next 10 years when the new official plan is reevaluated. Next slide, please. So this graph visualizes the cost of waiting. This is the do nothing option, option 3. There's an old saying, don't wait to do something great, because every year you wait eliminates the last year of success, as the above graph clearly shows. The box in blue represents at least $95 million that the city will never recover if the do nothing option is chosen. Matt?
Again, the 3 options the city has are option.
Next slide, please.
Oh, sorry. Next slide, please. There are 3 options the city has. Option 1 is the current plan to install 26 kilometers of underground sanitary lines to homes and hope the owners will pay to connect. Not only will the city lose $95 million over 10 years, it will spend tens of millions to construct sanitary lines to remote areas already on septic. If the city decides to proceed with this option, the key question to ask staff are shown in this slide. What is the potential cost of the proposed 1,200 home Brights Grove sanitary expansion? When is this proposed sanitary expansion of 1,200 homes expected to happen? And will it be mandatory for existing homes to join this sanitary network? And how will this decision affect the cost? Perhaps most importantly, do these property owners in the affected area know that they will be forced to spend tens of thousands for each household to hook up, plus monthly sewer fees? Do they agree with this plan? Option 2, start beside where all existing infrastructure is located and receive a return on investment immediately. In a short period of time, council will vote to determine whether option 2 will even exist or not.
Yeah.
We have the property that gives people the choice, has the plan for integration, sustainability, affordability, and a long-term economic benefit to Sarnia. If this option is not chosen, the city will effectively be forcing people who want to live near the lake to choose to live outside of Sarnia, as is currently the case in Kimlaki. Option 3 is do nothing, waste millions in taxpayers' money, and lose at least $95 million in revenue over the next 10 years. If existing infrastructure is used efficiently, Sarnia can further enjoy growth in a proven high-demand area, which is Brights Grove.
Next slide.
Next slide, please.
Your Honor, Your Honorable Mayor Mike Bradley and the councillors of the City of Sarnia, we urge you to reconsider the well-being of Sarnia and expand the settlement area in Brights Grove to take advantage of the significant infrastructure monies that have already been spent and that already exist. Please choose option 2 and expand the settlement area, allowing the efficient utilization of infrastructure in Brights Grove. Thank you for your time. And does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, thank you very much, gentlemen. I see Councillor Bird has a question. And Councillor Burrow.
Thank you, Mayor Bradley. Through the chair to Matt and Mark, thank you very much for your presentation. Excellent information. Just got a couple of points here I'd like to ask you about. So at this point in time, do you know or are you aware of any possible environmental concerns with your proposal?
I mean, we have consultants working on that. We are not aware of any major issues. We're in the process now of doing a 2-zone floodplain study, and it's looking very promising, both from that point of view and from the environmental studies that are ongoing. So we're not aware of anything yet.
Okay, thank you. And I really like the slide on new revenue. That's sort of a big eye-opener. Is there anything else you can offer to elaborate on that, sort of the assumptions you've made there?
That's a very good question, Councillor Bird. Thank you. These are the assumptions that are made. We're assuming that the average cost per home is $500,000. It's perhaps conservative. We're assuming the mill rates are not going to go up in the future. That's probably conservative. It could be higher. So just based on the tax rates that we're currently at, that's what these profits for Sarnia, and those monies are never recouped by the city of Sarnia. So if that's lost, there's a curve to get development. If the boundary expansion happens today, it takes years to go through the planning process, and it takes council's approval on the planning process to go through everything. This is not something that developers do on their own. It's a shared thing with the city to make sure it satisfies all the needs for the city. So, thank you.
Okay. So, and just a final point. You mentioned about the infrastructure development. So in the past, we've always heard from staff that it costs the city significant amounts before development charges are recovered from the developer. So if your case is different, can you explain how it's different?
Yeah, Matt, did you want to go through that?
Yeah, so our property, it's actually quite simple. Our property is located within around 30 meters from all infrastructure, including sanitary. So I don't know how much closer we could be to being in an infill type situation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Burrow, if you'd like to go ahead, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. What is the area of your property that you want to develop, and what is the expected number of units?
Um, thank you, Councilor Burrow. Those are great questions. It is totally dependent on what the environmental studies come back in terms of the floodplain studies and the environmental studies in terms of the amount of area that is there. Right now, the total property is 187 acres. However, a great deal of that will be, protected areas for parks and so on. So, and the other point here is we need to work with the city. We've been working at this for 10 years, where we've got multiple different plans, and we want to choose the right plan that has the right urban boundary or urban mix of development. So it's not a hard and fast number that we can specify. I don't mean to not answer your question, but it's not a clear answer at this point, because it depends what the city needs and what the city will require from us.
Well, what is your sort of expected in terms of single family, duplex, apartments, whatever? Like, what is your sort of expected mix? I realize you will have to adjust as time goes on, but what is your expectation?
So the total property will support a maximum of about 250 homes, but that mix is going to be, there's going to be multi-use along the front part and commercial on the front section, mirroring the commercial. I mean, the plan is to mirror sort of the commercial that's immediately across the road, so that there's a good mix of commercial availability for the local residents, and so that it's a walkable area. Then above that, the hope is to have apartment area, so we can have a higher density of people there. And then past that is, it's hard to show on, I don't have a drawing in front of you, and I'd love to talk to you in person on this, but past that is duplexes and so on. And then further, there's another homes to the south further than that. So I don't know if I've answered your question well enough yet, Councillor Burrow.
I'd like Councillor Burrow, it's Matt here. I'd like to add to that. So the mix of housing would be low density, medium density, and even some high density housing because of, Sarnia needs more affordable housing. So there would be, mixed use as well in there. We do understand though that there are other properties on the south side of Lakeshore Road, as well as the city-owned property on the south side of Lakeshore Road that is currently being used as farmland right now. I mean, that could be a part of this plan as well.
Thank you.
Sorry, but again, what is your estimated number of units?
250 units.
250. Thank you.
Maximum.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate it. And
thank you.
Can I move into the next? I've got Mr. Dave Manderful and then Mr. Robert Dickerson. So if you could bring them on, Mr. Manderville on, please, Andrew.
I don't have him in the call by name. I'm just wondering if Dave Mandeville, if you're in the call, if you can just raise your hand using the raise hand icon. You may be in under a different name. I'm not seeing any hands. If you'd like to move on, we can see if he joins later.
Okay, I appreciate it. Mr. Dickerson, can you go ahead, please? And then we'll go to Mr. George Millay.
Okay, Mr. Dickerson's just joining now.
Good morning, Mayor Bradley and Sarnia City Councilor. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you about the urban boundary expansion. And also thank you to all my panelists and delegations before me, because it gives a good insight about this discussion. As you see, that is democracy at work. You as decision makers listen to several people speak about this, and I hope you will do the best decision possible. My presentation, as you probably read in my letter, I spoke in general against the urban boundary expansion, but not really totally. I said either yes, but, or no, however, and I'm going to walk you through there. And I made some notes with the preceding presentations. So with the first presentation I heard today, I really agree with Mr. Colvin's presentation of agriculture, because once agricultural land is lost, Once we pave it over, build something on it, only if the homeowner grows some vegetables there, it's gone. So it's a precious good. And you may not know that of me. My professional education, I went to a farmer school, the Nova Scotia Agricultural College. So I learned a lot about agriculture, and it's true, like we have one of the best lands possible. I don't know exactly how good this land is. However, from my own experience, I have family members in Newfoundland, and they grow literally in a gravel pit, vegetables and crops. And if I compare Newfoundland with the land we have here in Sarnia and Whites Grove, this is amazing what we have. So I have to be very, very careful what we choose to be developed. It's a very precious land, and we are blessed to have it. Really, we're blessed. While going through there, I have a question to the chair. Can I ask the questions directly, or can I just refer it on my letter to go through? I don't hear you, Mr. Bradley.
Whatever's simplest. I mean, what's your list of questions? Or they can be questions that can be responded to after the presentation?
It's part of it. Maybe I just asked that because on my first page here, on your agenda, page 51, I asked like 3 questions. Because in my preceding presentation, there was the talk about lost revenue on page 46, and now asking for the big picture, because I see like what would be the lost revenue, but what's the cost of it? Because I see, yes, the tax money is coming in, but that tax money, is it actually covering the cost of the infrastructure and replacement down the road? So there's 3 questions, what I wrote there. It's like, what is the expected life expectancy of all the infrastructure? Is there any inkling how long it will last? So my first question is it.
No, I would see, unless Ms. Forfar disagrees, that your questions will go to the staff and the consultant, and they will respond to them. If that makes
possible?
sense.
Okay, it's just very important to see.
I agree, it's a very important question, because we're hearing one side, but we're not hearing the other side.
Yeah. Ultimately, this is a liability that I would hope that my kids keep staying here in Sarnia, and they would have to pay for it. So right now it's all nice and dandy. It's brand new roads, brand new infrastructure, sewer pipes, water pipes, but they all get bad at some point that we have to replace. So what's the cost, and actually do the tax revenue over the next, say, 30 years, bring enough revenue in to replace them? If not, then it's a bad deal, plain and simple. And also in my letter, I put like a video in, I don't know if you watched it, about the Ponzi scheme it's called, about suburban sprawl. Essentially, that's just the question what I raised before is it actually cost recovering? Or we go deeper and deeper and deeper in the hole, and then the city has a huge burden of liability. I also have to cite with Rob Longer, he's right. We need new housing, no doubt about this. But we don't need it by sprawling. I think there's enough land available that's in the urban boundaries that can be developed, and we can make it easier. One of my friends I talked to, they want to do a secondary dwelling unit. The idea was, hey, I want a garage, and I want to build a dwelling unit on top of the garage. But by the laws of the city, the zoning bylaws, the minimum height of the garage and the minimum height of the dwelling unit to make it legal would be too high in a minor variance, and then also if we detached would be also not allowed. So that's something where the city could really proactively go ahead and offer solutions with these higher density infill, have like pre-approved engineer plans for minimal cost. A homeowner could buy this plan and then essentially show the contract, hey, can you do that? Yes, I can do it, and go ahead and ask for a building permit. Very simple things that can be done because there's a lot of land in my direct neighborhood that would allow to do so. And really, we cannot keep on sprawling. We have to use what we have. And one of the positive examples is our neighboring community of Point Edward. They're landlocked. They have barely any land where they can further develop, and they're quite wealthy. I know the finance is a little bit different in Point Edward. They have the casino. However, they can sprawl, and they're doing really well. So what they do right and we do wrong, I don't know. But maybe it's just like a food for thought. They can sprawl and doing really well. Talking about new units, a train of thought what I have multiple times, I see that we are missing the missing middle. This is a concept of houses that are multiplexes, that have affordable units there, also accessible units. And just bear with me for a moment. We have a lot of seniors living in their family home. The kids are gone, but they can't move anywhere. So another option what they have is go to a senior's home, but they don't want to. Why we don't have this accessible rental units here, where they can move in, open up the family home for new families go in, while they live a more independent lifestyle, and then when they have to, move into a senior's home. That would be a great way to open up some family homes here in Sarnia in already established neighborhoods. I want to go to a comment from Councilor Bushy. Really great question. And one example with that, to use what we have, is Rainbow Park. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I would invite you to walk there. For me, it's a really good setup there. It's just like underappreciated. But if you combine this area with the waterfront master plan, it will be a gorgeous area. But right now, we have a lot of dilapidated buildings there. This could be fixed up or completely new development. It would be a gorgeous area. In walking distance to downtown, biking distance to the working employment areas, it's really great. In closing, I'm going to say that no plan is ever perfect. But this plan we have as is, without any modification of the urban boundaries, is great. So I want to stick to that. Stick to the urban boundaries. And if you must expand the urban boundaries, on page 53, I put like 11 points there of like what should be done if you expand it. Please build it as dense as possible, make this viable. And one point, and it's lived experience in my neighborhood, is this, they call it LULUs, locally undesirable land uses, and maybe I read to you the point 10. The development must be so complete that it's feasible to put in homeless shelters and similar land uses for people at the margin of society. LULUs, locally undesirable land uses. It can't be that shiny new developments only serves as one layer of society and leaves LULUs to concentrate in downtown areas. With that, I'm open for any questions you may have, and thank you for your time.
I'm not seeing any, Mr. Dickerson, but thank you for the presentation. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Mayor Bradley. Through the chair to Mr. Dickerson, thank you for your presentation. I just want to make a comment and then ask you a question. So it really irks me. I like to think that we're treating everybody in this total community, Sarnia Lambton, whether it's just the city boundaries or whatever, but I like to think we're treating everybody equally and giving them the same opportunities. So I just want to correct something, because I keep hearing how we in the Brights Grove area are part of the urban sprawl. We're not part of Sarnia's urban sprawl, because Brights Grove, I don't know if you know this, Mr. Dickerson, was the site of Canada's very first commune in 1829. So we are an established settlement of our own. So we're not part of Sarnia expanding out here. We were already here. So the other thing I want to ask you about, because in view of your previous presentation connected with this, where, and I agree with you, where we're talking about the bike lanes and having people a healthier lifestyle, walking and biking and everything else. So if you are really for that philosophy, we need to develop Brights Grove and give us all the facilities and amenities we need, because right now we have to drive 20 minutes to half an hour each way everywhere we go, because we have nothing out here. We have a bus stop, we have a pub, and we have a cricket field. That's about it, a few shops. So coming back to your philosophy on this, and I'm really fully supportive of that, the only way we can have an equally good health style for walking and biking, everything else as the city is working on, then we need to develop out here and have some of the same amenities and facilities so that we don't have to drive everywhere every day. Would you not agree?
Through the chair to Councillor Bird, 100% agree with you. And in the previous presentation from Scott Henderson, he put out an example, like slide page 44, where you saw like the empty field and then in the foreground, the single family homes. This is car dependency. Every man or mouse has to drive somewhere. And the only way out of it, as you correctly indicated, is to build a community that is walkable and bikeable. And that's why I have made a list of what it should look like. It's quite drastic what is done currently, but you're 100% right. We need to make Brights Grove as almost an independent village within Sarnia. Everything what you need to do, if it's groceries, doctors, employment, has to be within a 15 minutes walking. That means you do not have to rely on a car. You're 100% right. I hate to see that everybody from Brights Grove has to drive to Sarnia 20 minutes. It just clogs up the streets and it's not necessary. So if you approve any development, please ensure a high density to make it self-sufficient for the new development and the existing developments. So thank you very much for your question, Councilor Bird.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dickerson. We have 3 delegations left, and then we can complete the meeting and adjourn. So I have Mr. George Belay, and then the Masonry Works Council of Ontario, and then Mr. Rob Panzer and Mr. Jim Pumple. So
I
if you
do
could bring
believe
on Andrew, Mr. Millay.
I do believe Dave Mandeville has come on now as well. I didn't know if you wanted to leave until the end or come back to him now.
No, let's be fair. He was on the list. Let's go with Mr. Mandeville right now.
Okay, Mr. Mandeville, you just need to accept to join to speak, and he should be joining in a moment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Bradley and council and staff members. I appreciate your time allowing me to have my conversation here. Let me just click my video. I'll be brief, and if there's any questions, that'd be appreciated. Within the real estate industry, there's no secret. The biggest price increase driver is supply and demand. Any industry or larger commercial operator review 3 things for a city to be considered to be located in: permit-ready lands, labor pool, and housing. Depending on the labor need, we may meet that mark, but we have a big no on lands or housing. It regularly takes 3 to 4 years for a housing development to get full and final approval for a project. We really need to find a way of solving that problem. It's been said that we could revisit the OP as presented in 5 years. And like Mr. Longo said, then you start with the whole process over and over. In reality, that becomes a minimum 6 to 7 years at the best. And then developers come forward. So you're talking about a decade before you can get anything different done. That's, the boots on the ground thing. Sarnia, I believe, is working to bring to our area a large number of new citizens, but I have to question where we're going to put them. We've only had, as Mr. Longo highlighted on, we've only had slight growth for the last few years, and basically no growth before that for many years. It's my feeling that the best the consultant's data can be is 2.5 to 3 years old. And that's because of the time spent on the 1.5 years on the committee, the time to put it together, the research. So they're dealing with outdated information on our community and not looking truly to reflect our community's best and our potential. I also feel the OOP as presented will not meet the community's need for growth. Brights Grove is a lifestyle choice and needs to be, in my view, within our choices for areas to live. Mr. Burrell raised the point a few minutes ago about other lands and employment lands. When I was on the committee, that was discussed thoroughly. We looked at the research part. Should it be added to it? Should portion of it? Is there other selections? There really wasn't. It was just Area 2 and the Grove, if the Grove becomes a reality. So we did look over many other pieces of land. So the big question to me is the plan to continue to grow the city or not? The limitations on the OP plan presented say no growth, in my view. And we're really all very tired of our children and families moving away to find work or not returning after school. So all I can say is council is going to make decisions real soon on the future of our community, obviously. And then the public will make their decision on whether we're pleased or not. Thank you. Is there any questions?
Not seeing any, Mr. Mandeville. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for hearing me.
Appreciate it very much. And I have Mr. George Belay, and I got a question to the clerk. He just emailed me that there are people in the waiting room. Do we have a number and a qualification on how many? or are they just watching?
There's 31 attendees in the waiting room. And at the end of the meeting, they can be asked to raise their hand to see if any of them wish to speak who are present.
Can you do that now? So I have some ideas, Chair. Otherwise, I'll call a break if there's going to be another group of speakers.
Andrew, can you ask that?
Yes, if anyone does wish to speak, once the listed speakers are done, you can raise your hand using the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen. And then you can be entered in the queue to speak on this subject afterwards.
Yeah, and Andrew, can you let Ms. Burkhart know that she can email me with that information? Okay, let me keep on going here. I've got George Millay, and then the Masonry Council, then Mr. Panzer and Mr. Pumple.
Go ahead.
Mr. Millay, we can see you and hear you.
Again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak before council. I appreciate all the studies that have been done as part of the process. They're insightful and are useful in generating intelligent discussion. My presentation is going to focus specifically on the conversion of employment lands to residential. This is a movement that has been taking place in planning, largely driven by notions of the economy shifting from tangibles, meaning machinery and equipment, to intangibles, intellectual property and data, and also being really significantly impacted by the housing boom. And a lot of the policy has been, I think the consultant's report has been influenced by policies around the greater Golden Horseshoe. And I want to present some information to council, which I suspect you're maybe not fully aware of. There's actually a growing concern among policymakers and business communities at large about this encroachment of employment lands to residential. And I'm going to cite you some examples here. In Ontario, there's an organization called Ontario 360, and that's a think tank that's located at the University of Toronto, the Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. They have released a report, Employment Land Strategy for Ontario. And in this report, they specifically identify the conversion of employment lands to residential as a serious concern that's putting housing over employment and threat to Ontario's economy. Last year, Trillium Network for Advanced Manufacturing released a report, Ontario's Land Shortage, why it's a problem and what we can do about it. There is this notion that manufacturing is dead, and there is concern that we are losing opportunities to other jurisdictions, and a concern that existing manufacturing operations located in the province, and even in that metaphor in Canada, are going elsewhere because of this problem. More recently, Colliers, a large national, international real estate firm, has called for a task force to address the growing shortage of industrial land. So having a large land supply, from my point of view, is an opportunity for Sarnia. It's not a problem. And we should focus on how we capitalize on seizing opportunities from our current situation, not look at converting them to residential. In my opinion, if council permits the conversion of employment lands at the research park to residential, it's going to make it a lot more difficult for the county to develop its lands and for any Sarnia business park lands that remain in an employment capacity. A residential build out will certainly impact clients looking at the park, and you'll likely see more objections to development proposals and projects. The research park was conceived as a long-term play, 50 years plus, to be an agent to stimulate technology-based economic development, to bring back research and development to our community, to generate innovation in our community, and to really bring more diversification and specifically get us away from just petrochemicals. And despite the city and the county taking title to different parcels of land at the park, the whole thing was always conceived to be the research park. And I fundamentally disagree with the consultant's statement that the Sarnia Business and Research Park lands do not have a clearly defined role and a meaningful connection to the Western Research Park. And just look at the redevelopment of the old Dow Rec Center where Langtree Controls is now located. And that's certainly a good example of what can happen on the city business park, as it calls it, lands. Now, there's no question that development of the park has not taken place as quickly as we would have liked. It was purchased in 2003, but it really wasn't until 2010 when we got the monies from the federal and provincial governments to enable conversion of the labs to get us the types of tenants that are now located at the park. In 2010, the county built the 1050 building, and that building was successful in attracting some new tenants and gave a more modern design and approach to the park. It was a good addition, and it was a LEED certified building at the time. In 2015, Bioindustrial Innovation, working with the Research Park and Lambton College, received funding for the commercialization of sustainable material center. That has resulted in significant infrastructure improvements at Lambton College. And the collaboration between the Research Park, Western, and businesses has really now resulted in a renaissance of research, development, and commercialization opportunities at Lambton College. And who 5 years ago would have thought that Lambton College would be rated one of the top research and development colleges in Ontario? So converting the lands now at this point in time, in my opinion, is being very short-sighted, as we're really just starting to build the infrastructure and the reputation that substantiates the case for investment in the lands. And a few years ago, the Research Park was actually named one of the top research parks in North America. There's no question that in the report that was done by the consultant, they talk about some of they approach 18 or 19 organizations in the city, and a lot of those didn't see the park as a potential location for them. And I suspect that's no different what I would expect, because I suspect a lot of them were fabrication shops, machine shops, other types of industrial service-based businesses, and maybe some of the petrochemical companies. And that's not the types of tenants that the park was intended to accommodate. The consultant's report also makes raise a number of concerns about development at the park. I would say that none of these are really substantive to making the park successful. I believe that the city and the county need to do a lot more work to marketing the park. There needs to be a concept plan development to the park. I agree with the consultant's thoughts around getting shell buildings built. And there's no question that buildings are easier to sell and fill up than vacant land. I know BIC is working on some projects to bring what I would consider a potential anchor tenant to the park that can have a significant impact on new greenfield investment. I know that I suspect staff are aware that there are a number of companies now looking at the park for projects. So I think that if the city wants to make something happen, it needs to focus on getting the land site certified, which it has done. I know, been working with the province and looking at the other business park as well. Or I think the city needs to sell the lands and need to sell them to a developer who will commit with the time and the vision to realize the vision that we have for the research park. There is also been a movement locally to build clusters. And a lot of that has focused around bio-based chemistry. There's now a move around hydrogen, and I fully support those clusters. But I think the city and the county have moved away from broader promotion of the area as a location for manufacturing and other service-based businesses. And given the shrinking supply of industrial lands between Toronto and London, the cost of building, the cost of industrial space, I think we're missing opportunities. So I think a broader approach is needed to attract more development to the city, and converting these lands to residential would be a mistake. And I'm going to basically stop there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Millay. I should say to council that even though this was not coordinated, that the research park, which I chair, will be submitting a brief which mirrors very much statements that Mr. Millay just made. And you should receive that very soon. Any questions? Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Mayor Bradley. And thank you for the presentation, George. I'd like to just take you back to when you were first with Sarnia Lambton Economic Partnership and the good days where the airport was in its prime, and think of that, and then think of what we're doing right now with trying to get the economic driver back to a different kind of a prime, I guess, but a different kind of positive. What are your thoughts of how much, and based on your SLEP experience, what are your thoughts on how much business the airport will generate for the research lands, say, and in conjunction with Lambton College for sort of grassroots companies setting up sort of production or maintenance or different things that an airport would need, and kind of linking those three things together? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I have really not looked at what's been happening with the research, with the airport. It is an important piece of infrastructure for the city, and I think there has to be some creative thoughts around it as opposed to just commuter service to Toronto. And maybe there are opportunities around freight. Maybe there's opportunities related to the aerospace and defense industries. There's definitely things that could be looked at.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Millay, and thanks for your presentation. We have two delegations, and I'm informed there are no other people wishing to speak after the last two delegations which were on your list. Can I ask the Masonry Works Council of Ontario to come on? And then we have Mr. Panzer and Mr. Pumple to wrap up.
Mr. Armstrong, you just need to accept the prompt to show your video and then unmute.
Please go ahead, Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. My name is John Armstrong, and I'm here representing the Masonry Works Council of Ontario, known as the Ontario Masonry Association. We represent manufacturers, contractors, suppliers, and labor in the masonry sector. And we work with municipalities that are doing official plan reviews, secondary plans, and urban design guidelines to recommend language for their OPs and those documents to encourage builders to build to a higher standard. One of the things that just as I start off, I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize the Wawanash brick. Sorry, I apologize. That Sarnia is well known for. We're not here today to talk about urban boundary expansions or employment land conversions or to talk about infill. But what we are here to do is to recommend that council really do pay close attention to urban design guidelines. We know that the current plan is stronger in referencing them than previously, but we want to make sure and encourage you. I apologize. Encourage you to develop those guidelines well on the heels of your official plan, because the impact of urban design guidelines can have a significant impact on whether or not you're doing an urban boundary expansion, whether or not you're doing employment land conversions, whether or not you're doing infill, whether or not you're dealing with with the adjacency to your heritage districts. So and what we would encourage you to do is well, let me say it like this. I mean, we call our initiative Building Tomorrow's Heritage Neighborhoods Today. And we call it Building Tomorrow's Heritage Neighborhoods Today because the kinds of decisions that councils make on a day-to-day basis as development applications come forward and building applications come forward, those are 100-year decisions. So what we're encouraging you to do is to have the proper documentation and controls in place, so that way the Sarnia will be strong in 100 years from now with its housing stock and with its building stock. Because when we were looking at the housing stock and when we were developing this program, and we've been to over 120 municipalities just in participating in this process. When we were looking at that, we were saying, well, whose responsibility is it to have and build those communities that are going to be enduring for 100 years? It's actually not the developer and that original builder. Their job basically ends, and their job is to sell those units, and their job ends when they sell those units. And it's not that first time home buyer whose job it is to look out to the 100 years. It's really the council's job, and it's really the planner's jobs to look at what that community is going to be like in 100 years. So by paying attention to that with your urban design guidelines, and so that's how you can do that assurance, because we all have those communities and those neighborhoods, I should say, where corners were cut and where liberties were taken, and we all know what happens to those neighborhoods over time. So if you don't have strong urban design guidelines and the appropriate language within your official plan in order to give teeth to your urban design manuals, then if a builder wants to come to town or wants to build something that council and staff know is going to be is not going to last, then you really have very limited recourse to prevent that from happening. So again, we encourage you to pay attention to those design guidelines, and where a lot of municipalities in their design guidelines pay attention to a lot of things like massing and sort of suitability that way. More municipalities are actually are paying attention to architecture through architectural control, for example, and the quality of the building materials, in order to ensure that you've got that community that 100 years from now, your great grandchildren can recognize some of the same streets and some of the same buildings that this current council knows, and that this current council will actually be approving. So we as I said, when you pay attention to those things, that helps on the infill side, because a lot of things that when on the infill, a lot of neighbors on infill really, or intensification, quite frankly, really get quite concerned that infill and intensification will detract from their community. And yet, if you're going to be building things that are beautiful and long-lasting, then that will enhance the community, and that lessens the criticism as it relates to infill and intensification. If you're looking through urban boundary expansions and moving over towards agricultural land, again, if you're going to be taking up valuable agricultural land, having developments that will really stand the test of time and will really be additions to the community, I think helps to compensate for that as well. So we think that there's a good balance there. It's council's responsibility over the course of the 100 years. So I ask you to project yourselves out and really pay close attention to the quality of the building stock that you're going to be building. And then in 100 years from now, councils in the future and residents in the future will look back and say, this council really knew what they were doing. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Burrow with a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Have you forwarded your guidelines to our study in order that we can perhaps incorporate some of what you're saying into our official plan?
We have not as of yet, but we certainly will do that. We've got some language that other councils that other councils have used, for example, and we will be providing. If we haven't done it yet, don't think we've done it yet. We will be providing some line-by-line recommendations, just to make it easier for staff to incorporate language if they see fit.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, and appreciate your presentation. And I'm now going to move to the last delegation, Mr. Rob Panzer and Mr. Jim Pumple. And I will do a just general at the end, ask if there's anyone else that wishes to speak who hasn't spoken before, and then we'll wrap it up.
So I don't have Jim or Rob on the call by name. I just want to confirm if Paul Eastman, if you're potentially in to speak on their behalf, or if you're with them, to raise their hand, or if they're in under another name. I'm not seeing any indication from the floor.
Okay. Well, Andrew, I'm going to ask you if there's anyone in the chat room. Just one last, Councillor Burrow.
Just with regards, they did provide us with a written presentation, and they have a specific request with regards to a new building they're putting up. And I don't know how we should handle this without them actually making a presentation, but it sounds like it might be quite important for what they're attempting to do. They want, it says we are asking that our site not be subject to a 6-story height limitation, and which we certainly have a lot of buildings downtown that are with that. So perhaps maybe we could refer their presentation to staff for a report.
Would that be in order? Councillor Burrow, you've moved it to seconder, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Stark. Councillor Vandenberg. Councillor Stark, did you have something related to this?
Yes, I think this actually, the reference within their printed material suggested that this is going to need a rezoning. So to me, this goes to staff and it results in a rezoning application.
And that's, so I think the resolution is a good one. Send it off.
Paul Eastman did indicate interest. Sorry to interrupt. I believe we can go to him to speak.
I'm sorry, who was he?
Paul Eastman was the developer who submitted the report. The planner indicated that he may be with the applicants to speak.
Okay, well, we'll do that, and then we'll hear from him and then move forward. No, let me call the resolution anyhow. I think it's valid. So all those in favor of the resolution get a report from staff on this request. That's done. All of us. Unanimous. Okay, please bring on Mr. Eastman. Mr. Eastman, if you could go ahead, please. Mr. Eastman.
Hi there. My apologies. I'm in Texas today, and I thought that Rob and Jim were going to be able to speak. I could do a quick summary, and I think you have it correct. The proposal we have is essentially to expand the observer site, and we're working our way through a feasibility study right now to move that to a 10-floor complex. And what we see in the official plan is that there's a new set of rules that would limit that to 6 floors. So I think our request was that would not be applied to us, even though we understand that we'll need to do a rezoning because it'll just add complexity to the request.
I'm sorry, Mr. Eastman, I want to understand. you want to not do a rezoning process. You're asking the official plan to reflect the 10 stories as we go forward. Is that correct?
What we're asking is that the new, so there's currently we're currently the 10th floor application would be okay or permitted within the official plan. And what we're asking for is that new 6th floor rule that's coming in as part of the new official plan would not apply to this rezoning. We do understand that we need to do a rezoning. We just don't want the new 6-story restriction to apply where it doesn't today.
So Ms. Forfar, can you come back fairly quickly on that request from council before we deal with the issue of the official plan in May?
Yeah, through your worship, we'll certainly take a look sooner than later and bring back the report as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Eastman, you want to add to that, or you made your point?
No, that's great. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming on. And what's the temperature in Texas?
Well, it's 30 degrees C, but it's raining.
Well, that's no good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
I'm going to call one time just to be fair here. Is there anyone in the chat room who hasn't spoken that wants to speak at this point to council?
Yes, we have someone listed under the name owner. I can bring them in, and if you wish to state your name when you join.
Please, whoever's on the call, could you identify yourself? And
hello. Yes.
oh, hi, Mr. Panzer. We've already dealt with your consultant.
Sorry, just well, he's not a consultant. He's one of the principals of the company. Maybe I can just speak very briefly to it. My apologies. The technical difficulties here.
Okay, that's not
serving the whole meeting.
Yeah,
Anyways,
that's not.
Jim Pomple's with me here. Jim and Paul Eastman are the two principals of PEP developments. It's their development proposal on the former Sarnia Observer site that we're concerned about. As Paul indicated, our concern is that the effect of the draft official plan would be to impose a 6-story height limitation, and that limitation is not currently in effect. We're working through the process of a rezoning application. And have dealt with city staff through the pre-consultation process. The various background studies are underway, and architect has been retained. You'll see in the package that there are building elevations and a preliminary site plan for your review, and a more lengthy explanation of what we see as the issue here. So I know your purpose is this meeting is not to deal with specific development proposals, but we're hoping that you see that what we think is a very viable intensification project shouldn't be put at a disadvantage by change in the policies that are affected under the new official plan. So rather than having 6-story height limitation, which is part of the mixed-use corridor 2 designation, we would hope that designation could be changed to mixed-use corridor 1, which allows buildings up to 12 stories. That's the predominant designation that applies to the mixed-use area north of the downtown, and we would like to be given a similar treatment. So that's it. Once again, my apologies. Tim is here to deal with any questions that council may have about the development. He's certainly experienced in the rehabilitation of downtown properties, and is quite committed to seeing downtown thrive.
Yeah, just so you're aware, Mr. Panzer, Mr. Pumple, before you came on, City Council, Councilor Burrell, and another councilor, they moved a motion to get a report on the specific issue of the 6-story issue as it relates to your property. And we're hoping that we want to see where that fits in with the official plan, but we want to see what our options are as it relates to your request to us. That was in your letter. So that report will be coming back to council hopefully for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. As Mr. Panzer said, I've been involved in several sites downtown, trying to revitalize the downtown, the old Colburn Hotel, the property right across from City Hall, the Burger Rebellion, Mexico restaurant site, and at present we're trying to work on a site plan for the area immediately north of the post office on Davis Street to bring more parking to downtown, which is very badly needed. So I'm working very hard with the downtown to revitalize it, and this particular project would bring a lot more people downtown to support the businesses, and it's a very good use of the property. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, and again, we'll get that report to you when it's ready. It may not be the next meeting, but it's going to happen hopefully very soon. So with that, I thank you for being on here, and I'm going to wrap up the presentations, Council. I do have to have a bylaw passed. Councillor Stark.
We do have one more hand. Apologies, Mr. Mayor. Matt Huzefka has indicated that they wish to speak again, if you'd wish to entertain it.
Well, I'll entertain it, but I want to know what it's about, because they've already had their time. And they did have questions from council. And I don't think that's totally fair to all the other people that presented, but I will ask them what their question is, and council can decide.
Okay, I'll bring them on now.
Hello?
Apologies, we're just getting some feedback from you. If you have another computer device open with it, if you could just potentially mute it or leave the call. I'm on that one, and just stay on this.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, members of council, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And I guess my question to you is, you've already presented.
No, I can't hear you, but if you can hear me, that's great. I just wanted to confirm what was said by a couple of presenters earlier. I'd like to address an issue that was brought up by a couple of presenters that feel they know what can be grown on our property in Brights Grove. And just to be clear, our farm cannot grow vegetables, nor an orchard, nor a community vegetable garden due to the high pH and unreasonably high mediation that it would require. We know that our farms will, what our farms will produce, and the OFA or anyone else doesn't. Not only that, but even if we could successfully grow vegetables, we would need to purchase millions of dollars in equipment, secure contracts with processing plants, and deal with ongoing vandalism and theft because we're so close to residential areas. Any successful vegetable farmer knows you need good soil, black soil, full of organic matter to grow vegetables. And I urge each and every one of you to drive by our farm and see that our soil is not dark, not full of organic matter, and will not grow vegetables. Again, we've been farming this field for over 40 years and feel that we know our farm better than anyone else. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for that update. All right, council, I'm going to move to the bylaw session and ask Councillor Stark to move the bylaw, which just confirms the proceeds of today.
I move the confirming bylaw as presented.
Seconder, Councillor Dennis. All those in favor? That's unanimous. And then moving us to third printing and then to adjournment, Councillor Stark.
I move that the bylaw as presented be read for the third and final time.
All those in favor? That's unanimous. Okay, thank you. Now, again, to the favorite motion of any meeting, the adjournment.
I move that we adjourn to our next regular meeting, I believe on May the 9th.
That's correct. Seconded by Councillor Dennis. All in favor. Thank you, everyone. Lengthy agenda, but you got through it very well. Thanks, everyone, and thanks to all the presenters, too.
Thank you.
I'll put the intermission media loop on.